Russell's contract gets exposed after Mercedes announces a new deal, Williams reveals plans to challenge top teams next year, and Hamilton has been advised on dealing with Ferrari. Hold on before you click away, because what just happened at Mercedes could completely change the Formula One landscape for years to come. We're talking about driver contracts that everyone thought were done deals but somehow took months to finalize, and the reasons behind the delay might shock you. Mercedes just dropped some major news that's been brewing behind closed doors for way longer than anyone expected. Both George Russell and Kimi Antonelli are officially staying with the Silver Arrows through 2026. But here's the thing that's got everyone talking. Why did it take so incredibly long to announce what seemed like the most obvious decision in Formula One? Let's start with George Russell, because his situation was way more complicated than Mercedes wanted anyone to know. This guy has been with the team since 2017, working his way up from a Williams loan deal to becoming Lewis Hamilton's replacement. You'd think after nearly a decade of loyalty and some seriously impressive performances this season, his contract renewal would be a no-brainer. But the rumor mill went absolutely crazy with speculation about Russell potentially leaving. What made this whole situation even more interesting is that Russell has been having his strongest Formula One season to date. The man won in Singapore, consistently outperformed expectations, and proved he can handle the pressure of being Mercedes' lead driver. So why the holdup on his contract? According to sources close to the team, Russell apparently secured a multi-year deal, which suggests Mercedes is betting big on him for the long term. But the delay hints at some serious negotiations happening behind the scenes. Maybe Russell was pushing for better terms, more guaranteed years, or specific performance clauses. When you're performing at his level, you've got leverage, and smart drivers use that leverage. Then there's the Kimi Antonelli situation, which is fascinating in its own right. This kid is still finding his feet in Formula One, having jumped straight from junior categories into one of the most prestigious seats on the grid. The pressure on him has been immense, especially filling the massive void left by Lewis Hamilton's departure to Ferrari. What's particularly telling is that Antonelli's deal is reportedly just a one-year extension, not the multi-year commitment Russell received. This suggests Mercedes is taking a cautious approach with their young driver. They're giving him time to prove himself without making huge long-term commitments. It's smart management, but it also puts extra pressure on Antonelli to deliver results quickly. The timing of this announcement is also worth examining. We're now deep into the 2025 season with just 6 races remaining, and Mercedes is currently fighting for second place in the Constructors' Championship. Making this announcement now removes any distractions and lets both drivers focus completely on finishing the season strong. But here's what's really interesting about the delay. It might have been strategic all along. Team principal Toto Wolff mentioned they wanted to handle negotiations properly and make sure everyone was happy. This could mean Mercedes was exploring other options, testing the market, or simply ensuring they got the best possible deals for both drivers. The Formula One driver market is absolutely ruthless, and contracts can change everything in a heartbeat. Look at how quickly Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari shook up the entire grid. Mercedes couldn't afford to make hasty decisions, especially with the massive regulation changes coming in 2026. Speaking of 2026, that's when everything changes in Formula One. New technical regulations, new engine formulas, and completely different car designs. Mercedes is essentially betting that Russell and Antonelli are the right combination to navigate this transition successfully. It's a huge gamble, especially considering how dramatically regulation changes can shake up the competitive order. Russell's experience becomes crucial here. By 2026, he'll have been with Mercedes for nearly a decade, understanding their culture, their engineering philosophy, and their approach to development. That institutional knowledge could be invaluable when adapting to new regulations. For Antonelli, 2026 represents a fresh start. Instead of being the rookie trying to adapt to existing systems, he'll be learning alongside everyone else as the sport evolves. This levels the playing field somewhat and could work in his favor. The financial implications of these contracts are probably staggering too. Russell's multi-year deal likely comes with significant salary increases, performance bonuses, and possibly equity stakes in future Mercedes projects. Antonelli's shorter deal probably includes performance incentives and options for extensions based on results. What this announcement really shows is Mercedes' commitment to building for the future while maintaining stability in the present. They're not making desperate moves or panic signings. Instead, they're methodically constructing a driver lineup they believe can compete at the highest level for years to come. The delay in announcing these contracts also highlights how complex modern Formula One negotiations have become. Gone are the days of simple salary agreements. Today's contracts include image rights, sponsorship obligations, development responsibilities, and countless performance metrics. Mercedes has essentially secured their immediate future while keeping options open for further evolution. Russell provides experience and proven performance, while Antonelli represents potential and long-term development. It's a balanced approach that could pay dividends as the sport enters its next era. This announcement puts to rest months of speculation and allows Mercedes to focus entirely on their championship fight and 2026 preparations. What if I told you that Red Bull might be pulling the strings behind one of Formula One's biggest transfer rumors? And no, this isn't about Max Verstappen leaving Red Bull. This is about something far more strategic and potentially devastating for their championship rivals. Picture this. You're sitting at the top of the Formula One food chain, watching McLaren challenge your dominance with two incredibly talented drivers. What do you do? According to former McLaren driver Juan Pablo Montoya, you might just start planting seeds of doubt that could tear their team apart from the inside. The rumor mill has been spinning overtime lately, linking Oscar Piastri with a shocking move to Ferrari. But here's where it gets interesting. Montoya believes these Ferrari whispers might actually be coming from Red Bull's camp, and if he's right, we're witnessing a masterclass in psychological warfare that could reshape the entire grid. Let me break down what's really happening here, because this story goes way deeper than a simple driver transfer rumor. First, let's set the stage. McLaren has been absolutely flying this season, with both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri performing at an elite level. They've emerged as Red Bull's biggest threat in the Constructors' Championship race, and that's made them a target. But instead of just focusing on making their car faster, someone might be playing a much more sophisticated game. The tension at McLaren reached a boiling point during the Singapore Grand Prix when Norris made contact with Piastri on the opening lap. What should have been a minor racing incident became something much bigger when Piastri expressed clear frustration over the team radio, suggesting it broke their previous agreements about racing each other. That moment of visible discord was like blood in the water for rival teams. Here's where Montoya's theory gets really fascinating. He suggests that Red Bull could be deliberately feeding the Ferrari Piastri rumors to the media, not because they have any inside information, but because it serves a strategic purpose. Think about it. If you can make McLaren's management question whether their rising star is truly committed to the team, you've already won half the battle. This isn't unprecedented in Formula One. Montoya draws parallels to how Mercedes boss Toto Wolff publicly courted Max Verstappen, creating headlines and potentially causing internal discussions at Red Bull. Did Wolff genuinely believe he could poach Verstappen? Maybe, maybe not. But the mere suggestion that their star driver might be looking elsewhere could create exactly the kind of distraction and uncertainty that benefits a rival team. The beauty of this strategy is its simplicity. You don't need to actually sign the driver or even make a genuine offer. You just need to plant the idea in enough places that it becomes a story. Once the media picks it up, it takes on a life of its own, forcing the targeted team to respond and potentially creating real tension where none existed before. But there's another layer to this psychological game. Even if Red Bull isn't behind these rumors, they serve multiple purposes for different parties. For Piastri's camp, these links to Ferrari could be a way of signaling to McLaren that their driver expects to be treated as an equal to Norris, not as a clear number two. It's a negotiating tactic, disguised as transfer speculation. McLaren finds themselves in an incredibly difficult position. They have two drivers capable of winning races and potentially championships, but Formula One team dynamics often require clear hierarchies. The Constructors' Championship battle adds another layer of complexity because team points matter just as much as individual driver success. Montoya makes a crucial point about the psychological pressure both drivers are facing. For young talents like Norris and Piastri, this might represent their best or only shot at a world championship. That creates an internal tension that no amount of team meetings or PR statements can completely resolve. Every race becomes a balancing act between team success and individual ambition. The former McLaren driver suggests that now that the Constructors' Championship is effectively decided, McLaren should let their drivers race each other more freely. But he emphasizes the need for mutual respect, understanding that they'll be teammates again next year and that burning bridges serves nobody's interests. This whole situation highlights something fascinating about modern Formula One. Sometimes the most important battles happen off the track. While teams spend hundreds of millions developing faster cars, the psychological warfare can be just as effective and much cheaper to execute. If Red Bull is indeed behind the Piastri-Ferrari rumors, they're essentially weaponizing uncertainty. They're not trying to sign the driver themselves. They're trying to make McLaren question their own internal dynamics and potentially make decisions based on fear rather than strategy. The implications extend beyond just this season. If these tactics prove effective, we might see more teams employing similar psychological strategies. Formula One has always been as much about politics and mind games as raw speed, but social media and modern journalism have created new weapons in this chess match. Whether Red Bull is pulling the strings or not, one thing is certain. The rumor has already achieved its purpose by creating exactly the kind of discussion and uncertainty that benefits McLaren's rivals. Sometimes in Formula One, the most effective moves are the ones that happen in the shadows, where speculation becomes reality through sheer repetition. The next few months will reveal whether McLaren can navigate these choppy waters, or whether the psychological pressure will create the kind of internal fractures that have derailed championship campaigns before. What if I told you that one of the world's biggest Formula One teams just completed an entire European racing season using almost zero traditional fuel? Mercedes just pulled off something that sounds impossible in motorsport. And the final 1% they couldn't achieve reveals exactly why going completely green is harder than anyone realizes. Picture this: massive trucks carrying multi-million-dollar Formula One cars, hospitality units, and equipment weighing tons, driving thousands of miles across Europe from race to race. Now imagine doing all of that while cutting emissions by over 80%. That's exactly what Mercedes accomplished in their 2025 season, hitting 99% biofuel coverage across their entire European logistics operation. But here's where it gets interesting. Mercedes didn't start at 99%. This journey began back in 2022 when they first experimented with alternative fuels during European races. Their initial goal was modest: achieve a 60% emissions reduction. Instead, they smashed expectations and reached 67% in their first serious attempt in 2023. The following year brought even more dramatic results. Mercedes pushed their biofuel usage to 98% coverage across Europe in 2024. That single percentage point improvement to 99% in 2025 might seem tiny, but it represents something much bigger: about the challenges of achieving perfect sustainability in high-performance sports. The fuel making this transformation possible is called HVO100, which stands for hydro-treated vegetable oil. This isn't some experimental racing fuel that requires engine modifications. It's a drop-in replacement that works in existing diesel engines without any changes whatsoever. The beauty of HVO100 lies in its simplicity. Teams can use it immediately without redesigning their entire logistics infrastructure. Starting from Imola in May and running through the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, Mercedes tracked every kilometer their race and marketing trucks traveled. These aren't small delivery vans we're talking about. These are massive vehicles, hauling everything from car parts to entire hospitality structures that create those impressive paddock experiences fans see on television. So why couldn't they reach that perfect 100%? The answer reveals the complex reality of sustainable logistics across an entire continent. Europe might seem unified, but fuel availability varies dramatically from country to country. When Mercedes trucks encounter unexpected route diversions, heavy traffic that increases fuel consumption, or simply arrive at locations where HVO100 isn't available, they face a choice: miss the race, or use conventional diesel. This is where their splash and dash strategy comes into play. Sometimes achieving the mission requires compromising the perfect environmental goal. That final 1% represents real-world logistics challenges that can't be solved by good intentions alone. It's the difference between laboratory conditions and the messy reality of international motorsport. The environmental impact of Mercedes' initiative extends far beyond feel-good headlines. Over 4 years of using HVO 100 in Europe, they've prevented approximately 1,190 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions from entering the atmosphere. That represents an 81% reduction in life cycle emissions compared to standard diesel fuel. But Mercedes isn't stopping at truck fuel. They recently completed their first fully electric long-distance transport run, using an e-Actros 600 to haul their Formula One cars from their Brackley headquarters to Zandvoort for the Dutch Grand Prix. That round trip covered 673 kilometers entirely on electric power, proving that even the heaviest motorsport logistics can transition to zero-emission transportation. The team's sustainability efforts extend into the skies as well. Since 2022, Mercedes has invested heavily in sustainable aviation fuel for their business travel. They're targeting a reduction of over 10,500 tons of carbon dioxide in 2025, up from 8,000 tons in 2024. By 2025, they expect to have quadrupled their aviation emissions reduction since their original sustainable fuel investment. These numbers aren't just impressive statistics. They represent a fundamental shift in how professional sports approach environmental responsibility. Mercedes has committed to achieving net zero emissions across their entire race team operations by 2030, with full carbon neutrality across all activities by 2040. Team principal Toto Wolff frames this effort as essential to their competitive philosophy. Their sustainability strategy isn't separate from their racing performance. It's integrated into their pursuit of excellence. They're investing in innovative solutions that enhance performance while reducing environmental impact, proving that going green doesn't mean going slower. The broader implications extend throughout Formula One and professional sports generally. When one of the most successful teams in motorsport history demonstrates that sustainable operations are possible without sacrificing competitiveness, it creates pressure and inspiration for others to follow suit. Mercedes plans to expand HVO 100 usage beyond Europe in future seasons while increasing their fleet of electric trucks. They're also supporting the growth of the sustainable aviation fuel market, encouraging other organizations to make similar investments in environmental technology. That missing 1% isn't really about fuel. It's about the gap between ideal solutions and practical implementation. Mercedes has shown that achieving near-perfect sustainability in high-performance sports is possible, but that final step requires infrastructure development, policy coordination, and technological advancement that extends far beyond any single team's control. Their achievement proves that ambitious environmental goals can coexist with elite competition, setting a new standard for what's possible when innovation meets commitment in professional sports. What happens when a Formula One team boss threatens to bench world-class drivers who step out of line? Williams team principal James Vowles just dropped one of the most dramatic ultimatums in recent F1 history, and it involves Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. Picture this. You're fighting for race wins, maybe even a championship, and your team boss tells you that crossing the line could mean you're watching from the sidelines next weekend. That's exactly the message Vowles has delivered to his star drivers, as Williams prepares for what could be their most competitive era in years. Williams is banking everything on the 2026 season. New regulations are coming that will completely reshape Formula One, and with a Mercedes power unit that's expected to be incredibly strong, this could be the moment Williams transforms from midfield runners to genuine contenders. They currently sit 5th in the Constructors' Championship, but Vowles has much bigger ambitions. The driving force behind this optimism is their incredible driver lineup. Alex Albon has been nothing short of impressive since joining Williams, consistently extracting maximum performance from machinery that often doesn't deserve such results. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz brings 4 Grand Prix victories to the table and recently claimed his first Williams podium in Baku, proving he can still deliver when it matters most. But here's where things get interesting. Vowles isn't just hoping these two will work together harmoniously. He's learned some hard lessons about managing elite drivers, and he's putting structures in place that come with serious consequences for anyone who steps out of line. During his time at Mercedes, Vowles witnessed firsthand what happens when teammate relationships explode. He was the chief strategist when Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg nearly tore the team apart during their volatile 2016 championship battle. That experience taught him valuable lessons about managing two world-class competitors who both believe they deserve to win. The key insight from those Mercedes years? Elite drivers need boundaries, but they need to know exactly where those boundaries are. Vowles describes it as creating a box around his drivers. They can push right up to the edge of that box. They can compete fiercely within those limits. But the moment they step over the line, they enter his territory. And that's when correction mechanisms kick in. What makes Vowles' approach so fascinating is his understanding of elite athlete psychology. These aren't just fast drivers, they're competitors who've reached the absolute pinnacle of their sport. They need to know they can push themselves and their teammates to the absolute limit, but they also need crystal clear guidelines about what happens when they go too far. The golden rule is simple, but non-negotiable. Teammates don't take each other out. They don't crash into each other. They don't deliberately push each other off track. The team is bigger than any individual driver, and success comes from everyone working together, not despite working together. This philosophy directly addresses what went wrong during those turbulent Mercedes years. Back then, Vowles admits the team's structure wasn't robust enough to handle two potential world champions. They were learning on the fly, trying to manage an increasingly toxic situation between Hamilton and Rosberg. The lessons from that experience have shaped everything about how Williams will handle similar situations. What's truly shocking is how far Vowles is willing to go to enforce these rules. When asked about potential punishments for drivers who cross the line, he didn't hesitate. The harshest penalty would be exclusion from the next race. Yes, you read that correctly. A team principal willing to bench a championship contender if they violate team protocols. This isn't an empty threat either. Vowles clarified that if two drivers were crashing into each other more than they were finishing races, he would absolutely follow through on this ultimate sanction. It's a level of team discipline that's rarely seen in modern Formula One, where driver power often seems to trump team authority. The timing of these comments is particularly significant. Williams is positioning itself for a major breakthrough in 2026, and they want both drivers focused on collective success rather than individual glory. Sainz brings proven race-winning experience, while Albon provides consistency and speed. Together, they could form one of the strongest partnerships on the grid. Vowles' management philosophy also reflects broader questions about team dynamics in Formula One. Is it better to have two equal number one drivers, like Williams and McLaren currently employ? Or should teams follow the Red Bull model with a clear hierarchy around Max Verstappen? Vowles believes the two-driver approach gives Williams the best chance of winning the Constructors' Championship, which he considers the most rewarding prize for the team as a whole. The genius of Vowles' approach is that it doesn't try to suppress driver personalities or competitive instincts. He wants Sainz and Albon to remain authentic competitors who push each other relentlessly. The structure isn't about restriction, it's about providing clear boundaries within which they can operate at maximum intensity. As we look toward 2026, Williams appears to have all the pieces in place for a genuine championship challenge. They have the drivers, they'll have a competitive power unit, and most importantly, they have a team principal who's learned from past mistakes and isn't afraid to make tough decisions. The question now is whether this bold management approach will unlock Williams' potential or create the very tensions it's designed to prevent. One thing is certain, with James Vowles at the helm and threats of dire consequences hanging over any driver who steps out of line, the 2026 season promises to be absolutely unmissable. Picture this: one of the most historic races in Formula One history, a venue that hosted legends for nearly a century, suddenly vanished from the calendar. And according to Bernie Ecclestone, the man who basically built modern F1, nobody can figure out why it's still missing. Today we're diving into the mystery of the German Grand Prix and why one of motorsport's most powerful figures thinks its absence is absolutely bizarre. The German Grand Prix isn't just any race that disappeared. We're talking about a motorsport institution that first roared to life in 1926. For decades, this event was the ultimate test of driver skill and courage, especially when it called the legendary Nürburgring Nordschleife home. This wasn't some random circuit edition that came and went. This was a cornerstone of Formula One, hosting races almost every single year except during wars, pandemics, or financial disasters. But here's where things get really interesting. The last German Grand Prix happened in 2019, and since then, crickets. While F1 has expanded to 24 races per year, visiting glamorous new venues around the globe, Germany sits on the sidelines. And Bernie Ecclestone, the former F1 Supremo who turned this sport into the global phenomenon we know today, is genuinely puzzled by this situation. In a recent interview, Ecclestone didn't mince words about his confusion. He admitted he thinks about this situation often and finds it strange that nobody's making it happen. According to Bernie, virtually no one would oppose bringing the German Grand Prix back, except maybe a few people in Germany itself. That's a pretty stunning statement when you think about it. The guy who spent decades orchestrating F1's calendar thinks this particular absence makes no sense whatsoever. But then Ecclestone drops the real truth bomb that explains everything. It's just about money. If someone with the right funding stepped forward, he believes it would absolutely work. And this is where the story gets really fascinating, because it reveals how dramatically Formula One's business model has evolved. Today's F1 operates in a completely different financial universe than when the German Grand Prix was a regular fixture. We're not just talking about modest sanctioning fees anymore. We're talking about massive financial commitments that can reach into the hundreds of millions. Countries and circuits now compete with each other using enormous cash offers that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. Current F1 boss Stefano Domenicali has actually expressed genuine interest in bringing Germany back to the calendar. But here's the catch: he's spoiled for choice. There's apparently a waiting list of companies and even entire countries with their prime ministers and kings desperate to host a race. Portugal, Thailand, South Korea, South Africa, Rwanda, Indonesia, Argentina, MBA. They're all lining up with their checkbooks open. The competition is absolutely fierce, and many of these potential hosts come equipped with serious financial firepower. Take Saudi Arabia, for example. They can tap into their massive public investment fund to cover everything from circuit construction and maintenance to those hefty sanctioning fees that Formula One and the FIA demand. It's a level of financial backing that's extremely difficult to match. German driver Timo Glock offered some crucial insight into why Germany specifically struggles with this challenge. According to Glock, there's a complex political situation happening in Germany right now. The country's major manufacturers don't want to be involved in motorsport anymore, largely due to concerns about carbon footprints and environmental impact. Additionally, the German government has apparently withdrawn its support for Formula One races entirely. This creates a perfect storm of problems. Without investment from the country itself, and without backing from German automakers like BMW, Mercedes, or Audi, organizing a German Grand Prix becomes incredibly challenging. You need massive financial resources to even get in the conversation with modern Formula One, and Germany simply doesn't have the political or corporate will to make that investment. What makes this situation even more frustrating for fans is that Germany has such an incredible motorsport heritage. The Nürburgring Nordschleife was legendary for its difficulty and danger. Drivers who conquered that track became instant legends. The German Grand Prix produced some of the most memorable moments in F1 history, and its absence represents a significant loss of racing culture and tradition. Domenicali has suggested that earning money through sanctioning fees would be secondary to reviving this beloved event, but actions speak louder than words. The reality is that Formula One operates as a business first, and sentiment rarely trumps financial considerations. If someone seriously wanted to bring back the German Grand Prix, they'd need to present a compelling business case backed by substantial funding. The clock is also ticking on this opportunity. As Domenicali pointed out, Time is running out, with so many other venues competing for limited calendar spots. Formula One can only reasonably host so many races per year before driver fatigue and logistical challenges become overwhelming. Every new venue that gets added makes it harder for traditional races to return. Bernie Ecclestone's bewilderment about this situation really highlights how much Formula One has changed during his absence from leadership. During his era, historic venues like Germany carried weight beyond pure financial considerations. There was value placed on tradition, racing heritage, and the sport's connection to its roots. Modern F1 operates with different priorities, focusing heavily on global expansion and maximizing revenue streams. So here we are in 2025, with one of motorsport's most influential figures scratching his head about why the German Grand Prix remains missing in action. Ecclestone believes it should happen, Domenicali claims to want it, and fans certainly miss it. Yet the race remains absent, held hostage by financial realities and political complications that seem almost impossible to resolve. The German Grand Prix's absence perfectly captures the tension between Formula One's glorious past and its commercially driven present. Until someone steps forward with serious funding and political support, this motorsport mystery will likely continue puzzling even the sport's most knowledgeable insiders.